thank everybody for coming out tonight, seeing Adam Savage. This event is sponsored by the UWM Campus Activities Board. We're going to be putting on events throughout the semester and into next semester. We're always looking for volunteers, so anybody that's interested in putting on any events, any campus activities, or even has any suggestions, you can speak to myself or come here after the show. We'll be floating around the front.
All right, and today we're gathered here to listen to an enlightened and inspired individual. His name is Adam Savage. Adam Savage has worked as an animator, as a graphic designer, you guys get ready for this list, as a carpenter, as a projectionist, as a film developer, as a television presenter, as a set designer, as a model maker, as a speaker, as a host, and many other skills. In 2003, he combined all these skills on a show that we all know as Mythbusters. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, the man used at least 12 tons of explosives, destroyed at least 128 vehicles, set off at least 744 explosions, all in a short span of 9 seasons. Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Savage.
All right, good. Silent. Hi. What a welcome. Look at you guys all the way to the back. That's crazy. Hi in the back. So I'm going to start with a little talk that I've been working on. How do we become who we are, and how does a race car driver win a race? I'm going to bring these two things together. A race car driver obviously needs to drive really fast. But what does it take to drive really fast? If you think about the moment just before you're driving really fast, and the moment you get out of control, the moment your rear wheels lose their traction on the road, or your front wheels understeer and you hit the guardrail, and that very split second before you lost control, by definition, you were going as fast as you possibly could, right? So, a race car driver, in order to drive as fast as they can around a track, needs to drive at the very, very feathered edge of being completely out of control. So imagine this, you're holding this car at this tiny hair's breadth between being able to stay on the trajectory you're going and literally hitting the guardrail. This is what a driver needs to do for the entirety of a race. But that's not how you win. To win, you need more than that, because everybody else in the race with you is doing exactly the same thing. They're all trying to do the exact same thing. In a race, it's not just you and the track. There are other drivers, and the drivers is what makes the race interesting. Not the cars, not the race, it's the drivers. To win, you need to know about your opponents. You need to know when they'll back down. You need to know when they're going to make a mistake, and you need to be able to exploit it. You need to, at the same time as you're driving, at the very edge of most everybody's abject state of panic, you need to be able to be patient, watchful, and calm in your mind. Now, nothing bugs me more, there we go, nothing bugs me more than somebody who's discussing their life's discipline, and they explain that the discipline that they've spent their life dedicated to is somehow more pure or more expressive than any other. I took some package design classes at the School of Visual Arts in the mid-'80s, and I actually had a package design teacher who explained to the class that package design was one of the most pure forms of human expression. It's funny, but I think it's just as ludicrous as when a painter says it. Not to say that every art form isn't unique in its expression, they all have differences, but the real differences are less than we think. The deep mechanics of the pursuit of excellence are the same underneath. I'm not talking only about painting and sculpture, poetry, and music. I'm talking about costuming, upholstery, car repair, cooking, coding, graphic design, and cobbling. Baseball, banking, toothpaste flavor design, beetle categorization, running, ballooning, and plastic surgery. I am suspicious, as you should be, of overgeneralizations, but for the purposes of making my point, I'm going to make a sweeping generalization about all of humanity right now. We, as people, generally look towards choosing a discipline to point our lives in. Now, that may be the thing that we have a career in, or it may be a hobby, or they may be both. They may both require our dedication. We may have more than two. If we're really lucky, sometimes we get to do that thing for a living. On the long trajectory of my life, it's very clear to me that I have a macro version of attention deficit disorder. I am a serial skill gatherer, and when I saw that written down today in the hotel, I was like, I'm a serial skiller. I have studied and tried to get good at, among other things, juggling, the saxophone, unicycling, balancing things on my face, sculpture, model making, welding, set design, construction, sewing, cooking, drawing, machining, carpentry, model making, scenic painting, electronics, acting, billiards, writing, and millipede. And I should be clear, I didn't get very good at most of those things. With many of them, I got to a very specific spot. I got to this point where I'd say, like, I could see kind of what it took to be really good, and then I kind of stopped. I did get really good at 4 of those things, and I would say that those would be sculpture, model making, pool, and being a TV host. And I learned key things about myself from each of those disciplines, but interestingly, it's pool and billiards that taught me the most about myself. In a way, they gave me a framework from which to understand how to be good at all those other things. I played pool really seriously in New York back in the mid-'80s. I played for 5 years, 1 to 3 hours every single day. And in New York at the time, pool was undergoing this huge boom. Color of Money had come out in the early 80s, and every corner was a pool hall, and you were never more than 5 blocks from one, and I frequented most of them. And to be clear, when you're hanging out in pool halls, you're effectively hanging out with hustlers. They're the guys who are hanging out as well, and you are playing them. I never played for money, but I learned a lot from these guys. And I also learned a lot from books. I am someone who tries things, but I also want to read everything I can about something that I'm interested in. And I assembled over 85 books, going back to 1881. And actually, I paused because I realized it gets more weird and esoteric than that, because I also spent a year at the New York Public Library researching every article on pool and billiards in the New York Times back to its inception. When I want to know something, I want to know everything about it. And I read something in one of those books early on in my tenure of playing that I didn't understand. It said that sinking the ball that you're aiming at is 20% of the game of pool. I was like, really? This is 20%? I don't understand that, because I thought if you could do that every time, you win. It took me a while. It sort of blew my mind. I didn't understand. A hustler that I trained with, for a while, I was moved back in with my parents, like you all will at some point. And my father had a friend, a painter named Robert Kipnis, and Robert Kipnis turned out to have been a pool hustler in New York back in the 60s. And so I asked him for some advice, and he came over and he played pool with me every week for a few months. And one of the things he told me was that when you get into the crouch, when you lean over the cue ball, and you aim at the object ball, the one you're going to hit with the cue ball, when you get into the crouch, you want to be able to ask yourself 4 questions. You want to ask yourself, where do I want the object ball to go? Where do I want the cue ball to go after it hits the object ball? How do I want the cue ball? How do I need to hit the cue ball to make that happen? And what does the table look like when my shot is done? He said, if you can answer all 4 of these questions accurately, every single time you get into the crouch, you're going to be an unstoppable player. I used to frequent this one particular pool hall in New York called Society Billiards. It was on 20th Street between Broadway and Fifth Avenue. It was this great, pink, weird place, but there was this young hustler there who was about 17 years old. At that point, I was 22. And he beat me all the time. I never, ever beat him at pool. But at one point, he told me that I was just as good a shooter as him. The only reason he beat me was because he had more knowledge. And I still, at that point, didn't understand what he meant. I couldn't see that our skill level was the same, that knowledge was a deciding factor. And it took me another I played for 5 years, 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours a day. It took me 4.5 of those years before I understood those two things, before I understood that sinking the ball is 20% of the game, and before I understood that I was just as good a shooter. I didn't know as much, and I didn't know enough. I can't talk about that knowledge specifically, because I don't remember a lot of it, honestly. It's been a long time since I've played pool, but I can't talk about what I learned from it. I can talk about that knowledge as a category. At the top level, playing pool is about your strategy, the balls, their positions, what you're going to sink, and in what order. On another level, it's about the table itself. Is it fast or slow? Is there any damage? Is it old or new? How are the balls? How is your cue? On another level, even further, it's about your opponent, their level of skill, what shots they're good at, what shots they're not good at, and how you can utilize that. On an even deeper level, it's about your opponent's personality. What are their quirks? What can you understand about them that you can use to your advantage and against them? On the deepest level, it's about confronting yourself, about being able to get past all of the noise to only what's essential about what's right in front of you, that noise. I want to talk about that noise. This is the thing about getting in the crouch and asking the same 4 questions every single time. In order to do this, it required, all I could see was that I was forgetting to do it every 3rd time, every 5th time, every other time. It required a tremendous amount of fortitude. You cannot ever be impatient. You can't be concerned with how you look, with how you're playing, with what's going on around you, with whether that cute girl over there likes you. You can't wish the balls were in a different or easier layout. You can't wish that your opponent would screw up sooner or later. These are the noise that you have to shut out. When you can't shut out the noise, you choke. When you can, sinking the winning ball is just as easy as sinking the first ball. You have to wait patiently for your opportunity, and when it arrives, you have to exploit it mercilessly. It's like those 4 questions. They're almost like a spiritual meditation. Anybody who's ever done a significant amount of meditating will tell you, and by the way, I'm not one of them, but they will tell you that the two key facts about meditation is that you're always failing at it. Your body aches and your mind wanders. Your body aches and your mind wanders. The practice hand knows how to keep their mind from wandering while they're in the zone. I read this correspondence. I'm going to drift a little bit away here on a tangent. I read a correspondence years ago between this working, busy mom wrote to this Buddhist teacher and said, how the hell am I supposed to follow the teachings of Buddha? I've got 3 kids. I have no time to myself. I'm going 18 hours a day. And you have all these spiritual teachings I'm supposed to follow. I can't possibly do it. And the teacher said, well, look, I understand you're busy, so I'm going to tell you a couple of secrets. One is that all those teachings of Buddha, those are mostly to keep the students out of the teacher's hair. The other thing is that if you wanted to, you can actually take all the 2,500 some odd teachings of Buddha and you can boil them into a simple pair of words. Be kind. He said, in your life, I'm quite sure that you do get a tiny bit of time alone. Let's say it's 10 minutes a day in the shower. If you spent 5 of those 10 minutes in the shower simply meditating on being kind to other people, you would be exemplifying in full all of the teachings of Buddha. But, he said, that's not easy. It takes, like I said, a lot of fortitude to be able to do the same thing in the same way every single day. We are made of meat and we are grossly imperfect, and there's a lot going on in our brains. Our minds wander and our bodies ache. This is the noise that you need to shut out. In sports, they say you've got to get out of your head. A pool hustler's job is to put you in your head. This is something else I learned from the hustlers. Any serious study of pool hustlers, and I have undergone a fairly serious one, reveals that the truly great hustlers, Wimpy Lassiter, Minnesota